Rob, the guy that was with you at Oak Mountain, his name was Aaron, right? No, it was actually Rob, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Rob. We were both Robs.
Yeah, but we were joking about Aaron, right?
Yeah, but that was me.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the other guy.
Yeah, we could say it's the other guy. Yeah, Aaron with an E.
Yeah, I remember we got a lot of mileage out of that. There used to be a group of mountain bikers who came down every winter from Michigan. And do you know that group?
Yeah, we used to do that. I mean,
Okay.
I was part of a group that we would change every year. We'd go to some places in Georgia.
Yeah.
We'd go to places in Bentonville. We'd go to Alabama. Yeah, so we've done our fair share around those areas in North Carolina, and
Yeah.
just hit different places to kind of keep it new and exciting.
It was a huge group.
Yeah, we'd have like one year we had 80 people.
That's insane.
Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rob Martin. Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete, a podcast dedicated to diving deep into what makes athletes who they are. Today's guest, someone who has made a living teaching people how to ride mountain bike. And I'm not talking any kind of mountain biking, conquering huge features, riding steep slabs, and pressing through the chunkiest chunk without dabbing. Our guest today is Lon Cullen. He has made it down Horseface at Windrock without dabbing. Welcome, Lon. I can't wait to learn more about you and your love for the bike.
Heck yeah, Rob. I'm looking forward to catching up with you. It's been a while since we rode together.
It sure has. Glad you could be here.
I've been listening to your podcast to stay awake while I've been driving to different places to ride. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm glad that you keep coming back and listening to them. That means I'm doing something right.
Heck yeah, man.
So, first question is off the wall. Like usually I ask everyone kind of a funny off the wall question, and yours is no different. So I'm going to hit you with it. How often do you hand out your supplies to help a guy on the side of a trail with a popped tire that should have had stuff on hand for himself?
That's great. Yeah, Rob's actually referring to a time whenever he and another buddy were riding my local trail, Oak Mountain State Park, and they rode by. We met him, and I had a buddy with me, and they were asking for supplies for a flat, and I kind of looked at both of them and kind of summed them up by their gear and everything, and I decided that they were not being lazy. They just had made an honest mistake, and I handed out my gear. But I think Rob remembers I was hesitant for a bit, and then he spoke to me, and I heard his Michigan accent, and I looked at his gear and everything, and I thought, oh no, this is an honest mistake. This deserves some help.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. So we actually, after we were done, you had told us where your vehicle was, and we put the stuff back on your windshield wipers.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So we didn't keep his pump and tire lever.
Yeah.
It's funny because I used to help people all the time, but then I started realizing that so many people just want you to carry their weight, you know what I mean, and not be responsible. And so, what made me help you guys was the fact that I looked at you and realized that you're serious riders and had an honest mistake. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, up in Michigan, I don't think we have to carry stuff because we've got sandy trails, and the flat tire is like a flat tire.
Yeah. Exactly. And I've also been on the other end of that, because I remember I was riding Raccoon Mountain, a couple hours from here in the heat of the summer, and I didn't bring enough water, and man, I was about to die. And I remember borrowing water from somebody, and it's like, that's a big no-no. You need to bring enough water for what you need. But I just miscalculated, man. I went through my water too fast.
Right. I get what you're saying. There's to some people that should be a little more aware of their situation, but then there are that, some people that just get caught off guard and, could lend them a hand.
Yeah, exactly. And you're trying to make a case-by-case judgment, between teaching somebody a lesson who needs a lesson, but at the same time helping somebody out who's in a really bad spot.
Yeah, exactly. Next question would be, what would you do if you were not a cyclist, or what would you do for a living?
Well, I've always loved Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been trying to pick that up again after a long time laying off of it because of injuries. And I would love to, be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. It's a lot of fun.
When did you get started in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
It's kind of funny because my previous career, I was actually a pastor of a church, a minister, and I think it was around 1999, I was serving in a church in a small community, and I was driving along in the community, and I saw some signs along the side of the road that read Southern Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I kind of rolled my eyes, and I thought, this is going to be so silly. These guys are going to be doing these katas in front of a mirror, and a mirror doesn't punch back. And I had done very little bit of boxing and a very little bit of wrestling, and had done pretty well, sparring with friends and stuff. And so I thought I was going to pay these guys a visit. And it was so funny, man, because they completely destroyed me. Anything I tried to do, they just shut me down. And it was kind of a typical, all right, they've tapped me out 9 times, but now on the 10th time I'm going to win. Back in those days, footage data wasn't very available like it is now. I mean, now you can YouTube just about anything, but back then, I didn't know what jiu-jitsu was. And being a pastor, it was funny because I was so prideful, you know what I mean? And I got humbled so fast. And I'm supposed to be humble as a pastor, but but I got my ass handed to me, and it was definitely a lesson. And come to find out, that kind of thing had been going on even at a much serious level into the 80s, and actually before in Brazil. There's some footage called Gracie in Action or Gracie Challenge Fights where, Kung Fu students, Taekwondo students, I mean, you name it, they would go into the Gracie Academy in California and challenge the instructor, and the instructor would usually just send one of his students, and they would, just fight until whoever tapped. Too bad I didn't have that information back then. I probably would have changed my attitude a bit.
Right. And I think they didn't have the instructor do the sparring because they wanted to show that it was the teaching that was good there, correct?
Exactly. And they were very smart about it. They tried, they didn't want to hurt anybody. They wouldn't use elbows and full out punches. They would just use slaps, which was actually in some ways even more demoralizing. That you're getting slapped by another dude, and the whole, finally they would say, stop. But it was, thank goodness my attitude was a good attitude when I went into that gym, because they could have hurt me. And I ended up becoming really good friends with the guys there in the gym. Actually, the guy who led the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club, he was the chief of police in the small town where I pastored, and we became good friends, and I ended up becoming a volunteer police chaplain. So I would ride with the cops in the small town and surrounding areas, and be a confidant for them. And then he helped use me some to train his police officers because, like I said, I'd done just a little bit of boxing and my hands were, kind of fast, and it was good for them to kind of experience, hey, you're checking the driver's license and all of a sudden this guy's already got 3 punches in on you. We had a lot of fun with that. It was neat, and I still am friends with, his name's James Shrigley. I'm friends with him. I had earned my purple belt under him, so that was a really neat experience.
Hey, that's actually quite interesting that you guys were from the same area and then ended up being in a different area together.
Yeah. We've been a confidant for each other over the years, and that's been a really, he's taught me a lot of stuff, and I've always, valued my relationship with him, feeling like he's got somebody who he can trust because, police officers don't get to trust very many people, and for them to trust you, it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you still involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I am, actually. So I've had a bunch of injuries, like all of us who are in athletics. I had to step away from it because I hurt my neck in jiu-jitsu, and then I had to step away from it again because I hurt my neck in mountain biking, and I've kind of come back, and I'm, trying to be pretty chill by the way I train and tap really fast and, do things I wish I would have done when I was younger. And one of the things that's super neat for me lately is I've been trying to get my buddies and colleagues who are pretty high-level mountain bikers to experience jiu-jitsu, and then vice versa. I've been trying to get my professors and coaches who are really high-level jiu-jitsu guys to experience mountain biking. And so it's been really neat cross-training between the two, and I've been trying to do this for a long time, and I didn't realize until recently I heard a podcast by Aaron Gwynn and Gypsy Tales, and he kind of legitimized what I have been trying to do for quite a while and saying, hey, one of the best bangs for the buck you can get in terms of fitness on the mountain biking is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I thought, wow, I've been saying that for a long time, but it takes a champ to really underscore it and make people realize that, hey, this is good stuff,
That's cool that Aaron Gwynn came out and said that, and that he participates in that as well.
Yeah, and he's a fitness animal. I mean, I don't know how much people know about how much work he puts in, but sometimes it's easy to think that the downhill guys are not very fit, and the cross country guys don't have any skills. But that is so far from the truth. At that level, they're both sides of it are very fit, and both sides of it are very have a lot of skill, especially at the level that those guys and gals are.
Definitely. And obviously the cross country guys have more fitness as in endurance, and the downhill guys probably have more skill when it comes to steep and the techie stuff. But you're right, both sides are phenomenal athletes.
Exactly. And I think they're getting much closer to what, compared to what they used to be. You know what I mean? They used to be probably further apart, but now, I mean, my gosh, they're unbelievable in both areas, I think.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, cross country was just cross country. You'd ride your bike on a non-technical trail. You'd probably climb a hill or two and a descent, but the descent wasn't anything crazy. And now you've got cross-country riders. I mean, just watch a World Cup race. There's some crazy technical stuff that they've got to do.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And have you ever done, or do you do any tournaments, or do you just train?
Well, I just train, but, my son has competed a lot, and I've kind of lived vicariously through him and watched what he's done in his preparation to compete. My son, he's 25 now. He's been training in jiu-jitsu since he was 10 years old and competing since he was in high school. And it's kind of neat to see how that sport has helped him, because he was a very compassionate, young boy, very sensitive. And I was very concerned that he was going to get bullied, because he wasn't much of a meathead. And so I started at that point in life. I was a blue belt, and I started teaching him everything I knew from self-defense standpoint. And he, of course, started picking it up and loving it. And by the time he became a blue belt, I realized that I can't help him anymore. So I started looking around at some schools close to where we live. By this time, we had moved away from the small town where I had pastored, and we needed to find something closer. So I had started visiting different schools, and, some of the schools at that time, they were saying they were teaching jiu-jitsu, but it wasn't jiu-jitsu. It was something else. I remember I went to one school, and a guy got in trouble for shrimping, and he was actually shrimping the right way, and everyone else was shrimping the wrong way. A shrimp is like a basic escape, that you use when somebody is pinning you down, like a wrestler would pin somebody down. And this one guy was doing it right, and the other ones were all doing it wrong, and he got in trouble by his teacher.
Wow.
And so, needless to say, I didn't get my son involved there, and so I kept looking around and found another school. And when I walked in the door, I heard everyone speaking Portuguese, and talked to the owner, and his ears were all, cauliflowered up, and I thought, oh, this is it. And so we got him involved there, and Khalifa, who's the owner of the gym, is where I train now, and he kind of took my son under his wing and helped him train. He's been training under him for a lot of years before he moved off to Texas. But yeah, there's a lot that goes in. There's a lot that went into him training for these BJJ tournaments, for sure.
I believe it.
He lives in Texas, Austin, Texas, which is kind of a hotbed for jiu-jitsu. A lot of the big names live in Austin, and he's training under another professor there, world champion named Dungy. And Drayton is not a professional athlete. He's a family guy, and he's got a job and everything, but he teaches basic classes there, and he has competed at pretty high levels, so he knows what goes into it. He's had to train 4 or 5 days a week, hard rolling, and then cut weight and all of the things that go along with that.
Yeah, he's definitely put in a lot of hard work. So he knows.
Yeah, I love going down and visiting him because, when he was a kid, I was his teacher, and now he's my teacher. And he's like, well, Dad, that's not quite right. You need to move your hips a little bit more, and don't grab me here. I'll do this and all that.
Nice. Did he ever get into the bike at all?
He and I do mountain bike together. It's just that we don't get to ride very much together. He doesn't have his own mountain bike, so I always bring one of mine, and we just do it as a father-son thing. And he enjoys it, but jiu-jitsu is kind of his first love. I'm more 50% bike, 50% jiu-jitsu, and part of the reason why I did do the jiu-jitsu is so I don't get burnt out on the bike.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's why, personally, I try to play basketball as much as I can when I can, so that keeps it different. I try to do a little running, but then I also got mountain bike, road, gravel bike, and then fat bike on the snow, so it keeps it, mixed up a little bit to keep it so I don't get burned out or bored from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really wise, too, and, one of the things that I had mentioned earlier is that getting high-level jiu-jitsu guys on mountain bikes and then getting high-level mountain bike riders into jiu-jitsu, I also noticed that there is a difference in cardio. So the guys who are really good on the bike and can blow me away, whether you're talking about going uphill or downhill, it doesn't matter. easy trails, hard trails, they can blow me away. When we roll or, spar in jiu-jitsu, they're getting tired, and I'm able to conserve my energy and kind of quote unquote rest. And then it's the opposite, with the guys who can completely destroy me in jiu-jitsu. We get them on the mountain bike, and, I'm having to wait for them on the ups and the downs. And it's not because both groups are not fit. They are fit. Both of them are fit. It's just that when you start getting really good in any one sport, I think my theory is you can learn how to kind of rest. It's not really resting, but it's a way to, you learn how to conserve your energy even though you're putting out a lot. And that's one of the reasons why I think Gwen heralds jiu-jitsu, is because it's building cardio in a way that guys on the mountain bike are not able to on the mountain bike, and vice versa.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you do a sport, your body definitely has some adaptations that it does in order to conserve energy, I think.
And the better you are at the sport, the better you are at being able to adapt,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back in time a little bit and maybe talk about where you grew up and where you attended school, high school, maybe even college.
I grew up in Independence, Missouri, which is kind of a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri. For those history buffs out there, that's where Harry Truman, President of the United States during the end of World War II, that's where he was from. As a matter of fact, I drove by his house more times than I can count, and went to William Chrisman High School and wrestled 1 year there. And probably the neatest part of that was I had Charles Getty as my wrestling coach, and Charles Getty played for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was an offensive lineman, and he was I think fourth in the ultra heavyweight NCAA tournament that year. I mean, not that year, but when he was in college. And I think he wrestled for Penn State. So that was pretty neat to have an experience with him,
Nice to have someone that's been at a high level, right?
Oh, yeah. And he was such a big man, we had never seen NFL linemen, size guys in our lives. And he would show a move, and, he'd just be laying on you, talking to the other guys, and it was just so funny because you'd be dying underneath him, and he didn't even know he was heavy. You'd be laughing at your buddy, but you didn't want to get caught laughing. He may think you're laughing at him for something else, but you're really laughing at your buddy because he's dying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that was neat.
And that was high school, you said?
Yeah, that was high school, and then I went on to college at a small town not far from there called Liberty, Missouri, and that's where Jesse James robbed his first bank. So it was kind of cool. It was a liberal arts college, and I majored in psychology. And then I went on to seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. Did a four-year seminary degree there, and we would always go to the Kentucky Derby, so that was pretty neat to see those beautiful horses run. And then after that, I got my first full-time job as a pastor in Vincent, Alabama, which is the small town where I told you that I saw those signs of Southern Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I was a pastor there for about 6 years, and then I went through a rough divorce, and man, I just about had a emotional breakdown there, and I ended up getting another job, and the only job I could find at that time in ministry was in hospice. So I was a hospice chaplain. In hospice, people are admitted who have 6 months or fewer to live, and so my job was basically to go and visit those families and pray for them and, help them however I could. And my areas where I would go visit would be in some of the high crime areas of Birmingham. So it was kind of funny because, I was scared to death as a white guy going into some of, predominantly black communities. And I'll never forget, when I first started, I had bought a clerical collar that a Catholic priest would wear so that I would be identified as a pastor and not a cop or someone there to buy something that they shouldn't be buying. I'd carry a big old Bible, and I did that job for about 6 years, but that was a really, really, really neat experience, but a really hard experience. I think I counted up, I visited 2,000 people who died, and I helped them through that death process. And something like that, 6 years is a long time, because if you get too callous to it, the death and dying, then you don't do a good job. But if you care too much, then it's almost like you're going to be circling the drain and mentally and emotionally go down yourself. And so by that time, I had been divorced for quite a while, and I met my wife, who I married, my second wife, and we've been married for almost 17 years now. But anyway, she could tell that I was having some emotional problems with all that death and dying. I mean, I was getting to the point where I'd cry at a Kodak commercial, and she encouraged me to go ahead and resign. And at that point in time, our kids were younger. And so I had a stepson, and then, of course, she had my two from the previous marriage, two stepkids. And so I basically stayed home with them and kind of took care of them and was a stay-at-home dad. And so that worked really well. My mountain bike business started shortly after that, when they started getting a little bit older.
Okay. Do you remember when you first got started on the bike?
I don't remember exactly when it was, but I'm 55. I just turned 55, and I started riding a bike when I was young. So I'm thinking, maybe around 5 years old, something like that. So I've been on two wheels of some sort probably for 50 years. The things that I remember the most was BMX bikes. I'd have one BMX bike after another, and back then I actually count it as mountain biking because we didn't really have very many BMX tracks around, and the ones we did, we'd have to drive to. So we would find creek beds, dry creek beds, and see if we could make it down the creek bed without crashing, I mean, that's the mountain biking of those days. And of course, no helmets, nobody even knew what a helmet was for a bike. And I've kind of look back and think about how grateful I am that I don't have brain damage from some of the stuff that I did. Cause I remember one thing, my cousin, he said, "Hey, can you have your dad bring you over? There's this loading dock that I want you to see if you can ride your bike off of, And of course, I'm like, I'm in, count me down, I'll be there, And I remember I got there and I remember looking at the loading dock and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is tricky because if you go too fast, you're going to land flat on the concrete and probably crash. And if you go too slow, your rear wheel's probably going to hang up and you're going to go over the handlebars. There's just a sweet spot of the transition, and I backed up and did several run-ins, and I finally pulled the trigger on it and made it, thank God. That I'm just like, man, without a helmet on, if something would have gone wrong, my head would have gone into that parking lot, And I mean, it's just I remember one time they were doing some sewage work next to the sidewalk. They had it, all dug out, and they had their piles of dirt on each side. And I'm like, dude, I think I can jump this whole hole, double it, And I backed up and came hauling into it, and my calculations were off, and I didn't make it, and I ended up landing and falling down into the hole and needed help to get out of the hole. And I mean, all this crazy stuff that we did as kids, you know what I mean? We all did it, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But not having a helmet on, like thinking about that now, I just thank the good Lord that I don't have more concussions than what I did have, you know?
Oh, absolutely. No helmet and probably no seatbelts in the cars back then either, right?
Yeah, right. And how about smoking? I remember all my grandparents were smokers, and he would roll the windows up in his Impala, and like my eyes would be burning so badly that I would put my eyes up against the air conditioned vents, you know, and no seatbelt, you know. I'm just like, what's wrong with this picture now? When I look back, I'm like, Grandpa, cut the kid a break and at least roll the windows down, let the kid have a little oxygen. Right. Don't be the marble man over there. Give this kid a break, dude.
Right. They didn't know any better.
Oh, they didn't know any better at all on so many different things, you know. And now I think today the pendulum swung so much that we know so much that sometimes we're so risk aversion on everything that, you know, sometimes we don't have as much fun, especially with our kids. You know, there's got to be a balance there for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that statement for sure. Too many. Let's be careful, but at the same time, we don't need to be too careful. They need to get hurt so they can learn themselves. You know.
Yes, exactly. It's that balance. You know, there's always a challenge to find balance in any area of life, I think.
I agree. Do you remember what your first ever mountain bike was?
Again, I'm going to call it a mountain bike, even though we both know it wasn't a mountain bike. My first bike that I built up from scratch, where I bought the frame, you know, at a bike store and chose the wheels and stem and everything, was a 1979 Roger DeCoster. And for those of you who don't know, Roger DeCoster was, you know, one of the best motocross athletes there was, and he's still alive. He was at KTM. Not sure where he is now. Suzuki for many years, then KTM. But yeah, I built that bike up, and I have a picture down on my wall where me and another guy had built these shady jumps, and I got a picture of me on that bike doing a 1-footer. You know, we called it a cross-up at the time. I'm not sure what they call it now. So I was super proud of that bike. I remember my dad was on a GS 1100 when we found that bike, that frame, and I was holding on to him with the frame in between him and me on the back of that motorcycle getting it home. So that was a neat bike, but a real, like an authentic mountain bike, I think the one that I remember the most and that I liked the most was a Giant ATX 760, I believe it was. And I think it was in the early 90s, and I took that bike to Snowshoe in West Virginia, which is still a thriving lift-served mountain bike park. And those days, they didn't actually have the lift going, so we paid to get shuttled up to the top of the mountain in a pickup truck. And I remember that was when I was in seminary, and I remember you could demo a bike for a day. You know, you can pay for it, and I demoed a ProFlex, which those of you who've been around for a long time remember the ProFlexes. They were built in the 90s, and I remember the guy in the bike shop telling me, yeah, man, even golf carts have suspension. You need suspension.
So that was the first one you had with good suspension, or tried?
Well, that was the first one I tried, and boy, I was hooked. You know, I was hooked. But of course, I couldn't afford a bike like that. I was in seminary, and those mountain bikes have always been expensive. That Giant ATX 760 was fully rigid, and it was a lot of fun. And I remember riding a trail there. One of the hardest trails there in that time was, I want to say it was called Nosebleed, but I'm not sure. It's no longer there. It actually is where their main entrance is now. But it was the steepest trail I'd ever seen. And I was riding it and crashing and riding it and crashing it and crashing. And now I know what I was doing wrong. I was too far back on the bike with my elbows locked, and I didn't know that was a wrong way to ride, and that's why I was crashing so much. But it was really eye-opening because I had never, ridden a trail that was mountain bike specific like that. It was a lot of fun. It was a neat part of the journey for sure.
That sounds fun. That's how you get better. A little bit of crash
That's
here.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and it was pretty soft soil. It wasn't like a lot of the downhill parks, will have the like the jump lines, and, they're as hard as concrete. So, I mean, if you go down on some of those, I mean, you might as well step out of a car going 20 miles an hour, and this was a slow tech with a lot of loam. And so each time I crashed, it was like crashing in a foam pit kind of. So that was pretty neat.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's better than the hard pack dirt for sure.
Absolutely.
So, what's been your favorite bike that you've owned along the way?
I've thought a lot about this, and I think it's probably my 2019 Santa Cruz Mega Tower. It's the generation before this most current one, so it's not quite as slack and downhill as what they're making now. But the reason why I would say that one is I had a bike with a little less travel that I was riding with a good buddy of mine and fellow coach Keith Bonet in Sedona, and I've been riding that shorter travel bike quite a bit and was able to do quite a bit of stuff both up and down. And then I switched it out for the Mega Tower. I'd driven out there from Alabama, so I brought two bikes just in case one went down. And I just found that I was tackling more and more difficult lines on that Mega Tower, but it still did a pretty good job pedaling to the top. So I'd say that would probably be my favorite bike that's a regular analog acoustic bike. But I have to make a confession that I've been bitten by the e-bike bug. I have a transition repeater. There's a new place that's just opened up in Birmingham called Ride Birmingham, and they have some just incredibly well-built jumps. It's been really neat because when I was a kid, I jumped a lot, and then I stopped jumping and got into more cross-country type of riding and kind of lost that whole skill set, but I've been able to build that back, and having that e-bike just allows me more trips to the top to session more and more jumps. And I think my record so far is 23 laps on the e-bike, and I'll be honest, towards the end, I was so tired physically that I was having to take the green trails towards the end just because it takes so much energy and effort in jumping. So you can get a good workout on an e-bike. I used to think it was just a complete cheater, but I think it's how you ride it and who you ride with for sure.
I think what you're talking about too, I would definitely want an e-bike for, you're climbing up the hill to get back to the top to go down the jumps. And if you do that without the e-bike, I know how tiring it is because I've done that in Bentonville on some of their trails, and you can't do it all day long.
You can't do it, and I think for all of us, when we start getting tired, we start getting sketchy no matter how good our skills are. And so that's kind of like why towards the end of those laps, I said, hey guys, I'm just going to go down on the green trail, because I realized, man, I'm not quite my game's not quite as on, and these are, some of these jumps are pretty big, and you don't want to go down. So yeah, I think it's just a new way of riding, and you can get as much out of it as you put into it. The very first e-bike ride I had was with a guy, Ben Hobbs, who's raced in the EWS. I mean, he's very, very fit and very, very fast, and I mean, he about killed me on the e-bike because I was trying to keep him in sight, and man, I felt just like some of my early cross-country rides, like, oh my gosh, I can't drink because I feel like I need to throw up,
Right, nice. So speaking of people like that, have you ever, or do you look up to anyone as a hero or an idol?
I really respect Aaron Gwynn and Ryan Dungey. Aaron Gwynn in downhill mountain biking and Ryan Dungey in motocross and supercross, just because of their work ethic, their results, their humility. I guess, though, the person I look up to the most is my wife, just because she allows me to pursue the dream of starting my own business in mountain bike instruction. She allows me to train in jiu-jitsu and trusts me not to get hurt too badly. And if it weren't for her and her hard work with her job, I wouldn't be able to do some of these other things that I'm, have done. And she was the one that encouraged me to finish my doctorate at Sanford and hospice chaplaincy. So, she's my big supporter, and without her, I couldn't do so many of the things that I love. And so, yeah, she's my hero for sure.
I really like that. That makes a lot of sense, too. Someone that's in your corner, that's done something financially that allows you to do what you want to do to get your feet off on the ground and running. And it sounds like that's what she did for you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really awesome, and it does trickle down to the kids, too, our three kids. Even though they're all pretty much adults now, that same mentality. It's not just that she does that for me, but has also done that for them, and then in turn has allowed me to do more with them. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I really value that. That's really something I'm grateful for sure.
Very nice. What's your favorite thing to do on the bike? Do you like downhill, slabs, climbing techy terrain, crushing a tough obstacle? And maybe tell us why.
Yeah. That answer to that is yes, 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 yes. No, I mean, I like all those things that you mentioned. I think the way I like to try to accomplish those things you just mentioned in that question is with a buddy. So my best friend is Javier. I think he was there the day that we met you and your buddy at Oak Mountain, and we were able to ride a little bit together. Yeah, but he's pushed me. There's a saying there's a verse in the Bible that says iron sharpens iron. I think that's true. We've gotten each other better, and there'll be a feature that he conquers, and I'm like, oh shit, now I got to do it, and vice versa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think he's made me a better rider because he's really pushed me, and I've pushed him, and I think the last few years he's pushed me a lot more than I've pushed him. He's gotten to be a lot better rider than me. So now we call our rides charity rides, where he has to take care of me and hold my hand.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, he was there that day when you saved my butt on the trail, and then we did get to ride. I got to watch you guys ride up some chunky stuff that at that time I could never imagine riding up, and we also got to see you guys come down the steepest slab I've ever seen someone ride down, and I thought to myself, there's no way ever in my whole life I'd go down something like that.
We had a lot of fun that day. We laughed a lot. It was good. But yeah, I enjoy riding, slabs. I think my favorite place in the world to ride would be Squamish at the Alice Lakes area, where they have all sorts of different rock slabs, and the traction is just incredible. They have, all different levels of slabs in terms of steepness. I just love that place. It's a hoot. And then I also love Windrock because, I can't go to Squamish every month. It's all the way in the other part of the country or the world. But I go to Windrock once a month just to kind of work on my downhill skills. And that place is incredible in terms of how steep it is and how difficult it is. I remember it was just kind of like overplaying my hand with jiu-jitsu when I was, 30 years younger. It's the same with mountain biking at Windrock. I saw a video of Lucas Shaw who's one of the, best riders that we in the United States have had, riding down horse face. And I saw a video and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look too bad. I'll do that. And then I get there and I look at the very first chute and I'm like, you mean I thought this was a place to mountain bike, not, rappel.
That's funny.
But I try to go there once a month just to kind of keep my skills sharp, because, anything there is going to help translate to, what people call steep on other trails. I hate to say it, but I'm not able to ride the trails that I used to there. I can tell my skills I'm losing skills as I'm getting older, and I think that happens to all of us. Well, I don't think it, I know it,
Yeah.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah.
But, as long as we keep our hand in it and keep doing our best and keep that risk-reward ratio where we, we know we should, we're better off by continually challenging ourselves.
Yeah. Steep on the TV or on a GoPro doesn't really show steep. So I've gone to the World Cup in snowshoe and gone to the downhill at the last, 3 or 4 years that it's been there. And when you go to the downhill course and you walk down it, you get to see how steep it really is. And like you said, there's a section where they have it set up with ropes for you as the spectators to hang on to as you go down this steep section, because if the rope wasn't there, you would fall. So it almost is kind of like rappelling, like you said. And what I like to do after the whole race is over, and after they have what do you call it, at the end of a race, they have someone go down to make sure everyone's off the trail and everything's okay.
Right. Yeah, like a sweeper.
Yeah, sweeper. They have a sweeper come down. So after the sweeper comes down and we talk and they give us clearance, I like to walk up the actual track to look at how steep it is and look at the features. And it's just absolutely insane. And it's something that I know I could not ride. Obviously there are sections I could ride, but there are some things that are just, it's insane. So I totally get what you're talking about.
It's just neat, to see what leaders in our sport are able to do. Whatever sport there is, you know what I mean? I have a tremendous amount of respect for the high-level people who are doing what they're doing. It's the same in jiu-jitsu. It's the same in, endurance racing. I've got a buddy of mine I've coached a lot over the years, and he does this event called the 36 Hours of Pisgah. And, it's absolutely insane. I would never be able to do that. I would be able to do the 2.5 hours of Pisgah, you know what I mean? And he's doing 36, and I'm just like, oh man, there's so much respect. And watching those guys on that World Cup course, especially the section underneath the lift, it's so steep, and they're not just riding it and making it down. They're seeing how fast they can go down it and not touch the brakes, it's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. And then after that super steep chute, you've got a hard right corner. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's raining, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, or it's so dusty that you have no traction. It really is really neat to see people at the height of our sport. Ton of respect, and we can learn a lot and take a lot from it. Even if we can't do it or we'll never be able to do it, we can still hey, I'm going to tuck this away and apply it over here or over there or whatever.
Absolutely. How about thinking back, what other sports or activities have you done in the past that you believe have translated to a better you on the bike?
Definitely snow skiing. When I was growing up, I lived in Missouri, which is relatively close to Colorado. You only have this one little state separating you, Kansas. We used to drive across Kansas overnight and ski in Colorado, and I did that once a year for 12 years or so, and just the motion of the skiing, like using your hips. I think any sport that you're using a lot of hip movement translates to the mountain bike. So jiu-jitsu would be that, because there's a lot of hip movement in jiu-jitsu. Same with snow skiing. Moto, my father got me involved on the dirt bike when I was young. He had me practicing on the motocross tracks at the time, and we did a lot of woods riding on the dirt bike, and there's a lot of hip movement on the dirt bike. Those all definitely translate to the mountain bike for sure. Even though they're different and you're using your body in a different way, they're similar in that your mind has to figure out the most efficient technique to use to get the job done. And I think that definitely translates.
I know I did a little skiing, but I did more snowboarding, but I still feel like with the cornering and just the balance on the snowboard has translated for me, even though it's, you're facing a little different, but I still feel that's helped me out for sure.
Absolutely. And I think with snowboarding, I've only tried snowboarding once and about died. I think with that, you're on the razor's edge. At least it seemed like with me in terms of traction, and I think that definitely translates to cornering, especially like an off-camber corner where you're on razor's edge in terms of traction.
Oh yeah, it's exhilarating, man. It's great.
It's so much fun. Isn't it neat that we have all these different opportunities? I'm reminded I went on a mission trip to Haiti probably 5 years or so ago to install water filters in some of the slum areas, and we're so blessed to be able to have the conversations that we're having right now, and to be able to ski or mountain bike or whatever. Like it's we definitely never want to take it for granted.
No, I'm definitely grateful for what I've been able to do and continue to do in life. What types of things do you look forward to do on your bike, and what brings you the most joy?
I like going out with my friends and conquering lines, of course. I like teaching people in my business. Those are all fun, seeing them getting better. I think the thing that's on my mind the most these days is doing what I was able to do in 2022, where we went to southern Utah, and a friend of mine, Chris from Advendero Tours, he led me and some other clients on some of the best trails I've ever ridden, in the kind of desert type of environment. And I was able to teach those clients on those particular features right there. So that was definitely something that I enjoyed the most. I mean, that was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to do that in 2024 again. I've got a similar thing where I'm taking some friends and clients to Squamish this September and basically doing that same thing. A lot of these people have already taken all the classes I have to offer, and so they got the book smart stuff down, and now it's simply going to a place where they're applying it in a kind of a dream location,
Oh yeah, that's definitely a dream location.
Yeah, both of those are dream locations. Like, which would you rather go to? Oh, don't make me choose, don't make me choose. Like choosing between my kids.
Right?
But those are the things that I really, the day-to-day, I love riding with Javier and conquering things and getting some fitness, getting to those things, and then teaching, my clinics each month. But the thing that's the most fun for me is actually going to those locations and applying what we've learned here closer to home. Javier turns 50 this year, so I'm hoping he'll be able to go to Squamish. And then I got two other buddies who are friends, but have taken all my classes too, and they've got their airline tickets bought and everything. And so, yeah, you should join us, man. We'd love to have you.
You guys have a little more skill than I do. That'd be kind of scary, I think, for me. But you never know. Maybe I'll have to put that on the calendar. Sounds fun.
Yeah, man. And your skills have gotten better. I know they have.
Yeah, they definitely have, for sure. Yeah. I think that I might, with my enduro bike, I might be able to do, there was a big rock that you would ride the trail and ride over. I think I could probably do that now. I think I'd have the confidence to do that. But I'm still not sure about the steep slab.
Well, I bet you could do it, and there's always something harder for all of us, and there's always something easier. And the neat thing about this trip is my job is to kind of get people on the right trail for them so that they're being challenged but not getting hurt. And that applies for all of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't want someone to get hurt, but you got to push your limits a little bit.
Exactly, just finding that risk versus reward for each person. And the whole thing about it is, having fun. That's kind of where I am. And I know in a lot of your podcasts it comes back to that. Like just have fun, man.
Have fun.
That's what it's about. And we're gonna get better as long as we're having fun.
I agree. Yeah. Speaking of talking about coaching, let's talk a little bit about you being a coach, and when did you start doing that?
I think it's getting close to about 7 years ago. I started my business, and like I mentioned earlier, I had a career as a hospice chaplain, and so a lot of people in this industry, they were former pro riders, former elite athletes, and I come to this from a very different angle. I've always been a recreational rider, and so my teaching gifts have come from teaching other things. And so when I got out of hospice and my kids were a little bit older and they didn't need a stay-at-home dad quite as much, my wife and we were thinking about what I could do. And right around that time, I took a mountain bike lesson myself, begrudgingly, because I was your typical male who thought he knew it all and couldn't learn anything and was the best. You'd think that this humility thing I would have learned by now, right? But still, I still hadn't learned it. And I took a lesson from a guy by the name of Andy who owns a similar company to mine. It's called Dirt Smart, and he's a former pro rider, high-level motocross guy. He lives in Colorado, and I took a lesson from him at Oak Mountain, which is my home trail system in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was surprised at how much I learned from him. I was like, I've been cornering wrong for all these years, and I didn't even know it, And so at that point, just like with jiu-jitsu, once I see my own deficits and see that I can learn so much more, then I'm on board. I'm like, all right, now I'm a believer. Now I want to learn everything I can learn. And so at that point, I took more from him. I got certified with PMBA, and then I started trying to hire as many other different coaches as I could to learn as much as I could. I think now I was counting up, I've taught in about 15 different states, and I think about 650 riders now over the amount of time. It adds up quickly. And what's been really neat the last year or two, I was able to travel to the Dominican Republic and Brazil and teach in both of those locations through a translator. That was a lot of fun.
I like that this has allowed you to travel instead of just kind of being stuck where you're at. You get to go and teach in different places. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really been neat, and it was neat because the Dominican Republic trip, I'd originally gone to the Dominican Republic with my family to install, again, water filters in the slum areas there, and I met a guy who's actually a professional road racer there, and he speaks really good English, and so he was my translator for, the mountain bike community, very much cross country, very easy trails, and it was neat, to be able to teach through a translator. And then when I went to Brazil, my black belt professor who teaches me a lot of jiu-jitsu, I stayed with his family there, and so he and his brothers would teach me jiu-jitsu, and then we would go ride, and then I would teach some of his friends there mountain biking, and he would be my translator. So it's very different whenever you're teaching things you always teach, but you're having to teach through a translator, because you're having to be more succinct about what you say and how you say it. And even doing that, sometimes some things just will not translate. So it was definitely a challenge. It was a fun challenge, though.
That's cool. I like that. You mentioned cornering. What are some of the best pieces of advice on bike handling that you could give in regards to cornering that people could maybe implement from just listening here?
Probably the most simple thing is something I learned from Nico Mullally, and I got to give a shout out to him because, he's a multi-time national champion. I think he came in fourth, something like that, at the World Championships in 2014. I may have that wrong, but it was way up there. He came in fourth with a chainless run. So the guy definitely knows how to corner, right? He took time out of his schedule to give me a couple private lessons, which I thought was super cool because he didn't have to do that. The guy's busy, But for my 50th birthday, he did that. One of the things that he said is so simple, but so hard to do, and that is lean the bike. And it's funny because I still see videos of me trying to lean the bike, and I'm not leaning it enough, and I think I am when I'm riding it, but I'm not leaning it enough. And that's one of the things. He would follow me with a POV camera, and then we would look at the footage, and I'd be trying to keep the bike straight up and down, even though I thought I was leaning it so much, and the camera never lies, right?
Right. So leaning the bike, and when you say leaning the bike, you mean separation from body and bike, kind of the bike goes down, but you don't lean with it, or leaning with it?
Both. So I think one of the common mistakes in mountain biking is that people don't realize that both are going on in every corner. So yes, you're right. There is a separation from the bike. That's one thing that's going on in cornering. And the other is leaning with the bike. In other words, not separating from the bike. And every corner, you have a certain percentage of both of those going on. In a flat land corner, you have a lot of separating from the bike and not as much leaning with the bike, but you still have some leaning with the bike. In a bermed corner, you have a lot of leaning with the bike and not as much separating from the bike, but you still have some separation from the bike. And if you snapshot some of the best corners in the world, whether they be in cross country, downhill, enduro, whatever, you can kind of see a certain percentage of both. And a lot of times in my class, what I do is, I have pictures that are laminated, and I show my clients exactly what I'm talking about, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, and if you see the best in the world doing it, it's like, and it works for them, hey, it might work for us.
Absolutely. So you were about to say something else, and I interrupted you. Do you remember what you were going to say?
Yeah, I do. And so this is another thing that I learned from Nico, and it is such a basic thing. If you want to lean the bike to the left, then you don't want to use your inside hand, which in that case would be your left hand, to get the bike to start to lean. Because if you do that, that front tire will wash out on you. What you want to do instead is if you want to lean the bike to the left to turn to the left, you want to use your outside hand, which would be the right hand, to help initiate the lean of the bike and keep your inside hand lighter. And so maybe an easier way to think about it is all the action in the corner is going on the outside. Outside pedal is going to be lower than the inside pedal. Outside grip is going to be used for some pressure to help that bike lean. You don't want to use your inside to do much at all, because if you do, then that front wheel is going to wash out, or you're going to let that inside pedal drop too much and get a pedal strike and have a crash.
You actually, I think, told me that maybe a couple of years ago, said, shh, keep it quiet.
Yeah, right?
Oh, and I've used that, and it's a darn good technique, I can attest. I mean, it takes a little bit to get used to weighting the outside hand because it feels funny, but once you kind of get the hang of it, you can definitely get a lot more grip in the corners.
Yes, exactly. And I think, with any sport, there are such subtleties. So one of the things that I do to show what you're doing with that outside hand with my class is I'll come up beside one of the clients, or in front of one of the clients, and I'll stand there and I'll say, all right, look, what's carrying my weight? And they'll look at me like, well, you idiot, your feet are, because you're just standing there. And I'm like, exactly. So my feet are carrying my weight, and then I'll put my hand on their shoulder, and I'll put pressure down on their shoulder, and they'll feel that pressure. And then I'll say, now, if you move, am I going to fall over? And they're like, no, because your weight's in your feet. You're just putting pressure on my shoulder. And I said, exactly. That's what's going on in a corner. Your weight is being supported by your feet on the pedal, primarily the outside pedal, but you're using only pressure with your hand to get the bike to lean. You see, it's not actual weight. You don't want to weight it because then your body's not set up the way God made it, where your weight's being carried in your feet. Instead, it's being set up like a dog or a cat, where your weight's being transferred with your front paws and your rear paws. So we always want to keep our weight in our feet and just use that pressure from the outside grip to help lean the bike. Yeah, I mean, it's way easier to show this than it is to explain it. But yeah, there's so many subtleties, and that's why you see, like Sam Hill, multi-time Enduro World Series champion. He's so good at cornering. Well, all the other guys and gals racing in the EWS are good at cornering too. But like, he's at a different level because he's able to do these subtleties that that you and I are trying to unpack or explain.
So what's the easiest thing to fix when it comes to bike handling in general?
The easiest thing to fix is that lie that you're just supposed to get back on the bike when you're going downhill. That's a lie that's been here since, since as long as I can remember. Matter of fact, when I had that giant ATX 760 riding trails in Louisville, people would crash, and I would give my unsolicited advice and say, hey, man, you weren't back far enough. You lean back further, you'll be fine. And then they'd lean back further and crash even sooner, and you still hear that. If you ever watch a father and son at a tricky place, there's a place called Blood Rock here at Oak Mountain, and the father's trying to do the best by the son or the daughter, and he'll be saying, lean back, just lean back. And like, that's the worst thing you can do, because if you lean back, you lock your elbows out, and then when the front tire begins to lose traction, not if, because it's always going to lose traction sometime, whether it be pine straw or moisture or root. If you're leaned all the way back and you have your elbows locked out, you have no way to reset your body position, and you're just going to crash. You're going to get, that boulder shoulder. Whereas if you have your elbows bent and you're not leaning back as far, then when that front tire shifts, you can recover and not crash. And that's really easy to show people, because I have some pictures of people doing it wrong, and then right beside them I have a picture of the best in the world doing it right. And you're like, oh, so I'm not supposed to lock my elbows out. And I'm like, no, not unless you're throwing a manual or a coaster wheelie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about this, and maybe like back in the day, they would say get back because it felt safer because we didn't have dropper posts. But now that we have dropper posts, that allows us to not get back but get down and get our center of gravity down where we can keep our elbows bent. Does that maybe make sense?
Exactly. I think you're right. I think that's the reason. That's one of the reasons why. And so some people, realize that before droppers came on the scene. And like, I remember for years, whenever I'd raced a cross-country race at Oak Mountain, and we would go down Blood Rock, which at that time was the hardest section. I remember I had a quick release on my bike, and I would pull off the side of the trail, open my quick release, shove my seat down, and everyone else was either crashing on Blood Rock or walking down it. And I would ride down because I took the extra time to lower the seat. And then once I got through it, and I'd pull off the trail and raise it back up. And I know that there's a question there of whether I'd be faster just to walk down Blood Rock, but maybe I would be. But I wanted to ride it because all the fans were there, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think that's something that with dropper post, but you still I still have a lot of clients who even want to resist a dropper post, and because of weight. And I think to myself, I'm like, as the courses are getting harder and harder, the cross country courses, it's super risky not to have a dropper on. And they'll always say, well, such and such, Nino Schurter can do this, and I'm like, he can ride this in a shopping cart, but you're not him. Like, I'm not LeBron James, and you're not either. So let's bring it back from your dream and bring it back to the reality of who you are and who I am, and we both need droppers.
Right. Yeah, even most people still on the World Cup cross country racing, most of those people have droppers.
Yes, I agree. Especially the higher level guys and guys and gals. There's always somebody who can do something that should not be able to be done. Whether it be in basketball, football, baseball, whatever, soccer. But what are we basing our riding on? Let's base our riding on the majority of what the majority of riders are doing at the higher level, and let's watch them. Let's not look at Pele's exceptional flip over goal. That's not the way most goals are scored,
No, good point. How long do you plan on being on the bike and in coaching?
I hope that I can be on the bike as long as I've got a friend who, his name is Mr. Vines, and he turns 90 this year. And I see him every once in a while out at Oak Mountain, and he just moved to flat pedals like about 5 years ago when he was 85. Reluctantly, I kept talking to him. I said, Mr. Vine, you need to get on flat pedals, because if you can't get unclipped when you need to and you break a hip, man, that's not going to be good for you. And he's finally moved over. So I totally know that he's got good genes, and I may not be able to make it that long, but as long as possible. And I plan on continuing to coach. The thing that worries me a little bit about mountain biking is I think sometimes mountain bikers won't go to a coach who can't ride really difficult stuff. And I'm hoping that that'll change over time, because I know that in other sports, like if you look at college football, those coaches along the sideline, they can't do a quarter of the things of what their players do, but they can still do a good job coaching. And I'm hoping that there'll be a, kind of a realization in mountain biking that, hey, even though this guy's 70 or 75, whatever, and he can't hit this 25-foot double, that doesn't mean that he can't watch me and give me some tips, because he's done it in the past and he remembers what he did. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
That's a great point. I've never thought of that. But when you started to say it, I was like, interesting. Because you're right. I mean, football, baseball, basketball, all at the pro level, all these coaches are, most of the time, they're old guys, and they can't do anything anymore, but they've got the knowledge to teach it. And you're right. Just as a mountain bike coach, when they get old, they have the knowledge, and they can show you what you need to do by watching what you're doing wrong.
And, I'm encouraged because I've had some athletes now who are younger, and they can do 9 out of 10 things better than me. Hands down, like, no question. But they still are paying me to say, okay, how can you get me better here? Or how can you get me better there? And I think that's good for me, but it's also good for them, because the point is not, are you better than your coach? The point is, are you the best you can be?
Yes. That's a good point. Why do you love the sport, and what keeps you going?
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun to get outside, isn't it? And get a workout in. I think that's part of the reason why I'm trying to get some of the guys in jiu-jitsu on mountain bikes is because they're in the gym all the time, and it's so good for them mentally and physically and spiritually to get out of the gym and get in God's beautiful creation. And I think it's the same with me. It's so nice to get out there and just, you get up that super early morning and the fog's still out, and it's just awesome, and traveling to different places and riding. I mean, I think for me that's what keeps me going for sure.
Being outside, breathing that fresh air, I can't get enough of it, man.
And it's great to do it with friends. It's also great to do it solo. It's mixing it up, it really is a lot of fun. It's something I'm super grateful for.
Same here. What trail would you recommend that is a must-ride anywhere in the world that you've been on?
So I have to pick three. Can I pick three?
You can pick three.
All right, but I'll make them fast. The Tahoe Rim Trail, which includes the Flume Trail and near Lake Tahoe, I'd definitely say that's up there. The McKenzie River Trail in Oregon. And then the last one would be one that's probably not known as much. Is called the Bar Trail, and it's the trail that goes down from the very top of Pikes Peak.
That's in Colorado?
Yeah, in Colorado, yeah.
So the Oregon Trail, is that Mount Rainier?
It's not. It's called the McKenzie River Trail. I'd have to look at. I've only ridden it one time. I have to look on the map in Oregon where it actually is. But it's a very popular trail. It's just when you're riding down that trail, you think that you're going to see Frodo Baggins from The Hobbit, walk in front of you, or a unicorn jump across. Like, it is just surreal. All the different scenery that you have. There's a river that's running right beside it, and there are some really tough sections if one wants to have the technical challenge, but, it's also easy to walk those sections, and you have to be very fit to do it. I know fitness is relative. You're so much more fit than me, but like a basic mountain bike rider, they would definitely need some fitness to do that one. And the same with the Tahoe Rim Trail, the same kind of deal.
Okay. Huh. I'll have to put those on my list for when hopefully the wife and I go out in the van and get some exploring, and when the kids, when the kids are out of the house.
You would love both of those. The Bar Trail in Pikes Peak is a little bit trickier because you have to there's no place to park at the top, so you're getting shuttled up to the very top of Pikes Peak and dropped off, and then it's a little bit harder to know one's way down, and then you also want to pick a time of the day when there's not as many hikers. So I would not have been able to do that experience without local knowledge. But It's pretty darn cool to be up that high and descend that far through all sorts of different scenery, and that was pretty neat.
That sounds fun as well. Going from the top, maybe is that like, there's not a lot of trees, then you go into a different kind of a forest, and then probably even into a more lush forest as you keep going down?
Exactly. And coming from, almost sea level to one of the highest peaks in North America, man, you're talking about being lightheaded when you start on the bike at the top. I mean, it's almost, I walked quite a ways to try to get acclimated to the elevation, and then I was fine as I started going down. But boy, it's definitely no joke,
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds fun as well. All right, food for thought.
Yeah, man, keep those dreams alive.
You got it. If you were to give advice to younger athletes that look up to you, what would it be?
I would say don't ever let it go. Like with me, I raced BMX, I rode, my bike a lot, and then whenever the car and the girls and everything, started coming along, I just kind of completely stopped riding for a while. And I would say that was a mistake I made. I wish I would have at least kept my hand in it the whole time. So I would say for them, if you start feeling burnout and you don't want to ride, don't ride, but don't stop completely, because it's almost like learning a foreign language. You know, you put so much time into this, don't lose it. Don't lose it. Back off, yes. Don't get burnt out, yes. Keep it fun, definitely, but just keep doing it.
I like that. That's a little different than what I've been hearing, most of the time. Keep your hand in it. Don't give it up. Yeah, especially the bike, because you can do so many things on the bike.
Yeah, and then, the thing about it is, like, when I was a kid on the BMX bike, I was a pretty good jumper. But then I lost it. I lost the bike. Like, I stepped out of it for so long, and then by the time I came back, I was riding more wheels on the ground stuff, more techie stuff. And, I lost the ability to jump, and I'm having to relearn it. If I had just kept my hand in it, I wouldn't have to relearn a skill that I already had,
Makes sense. Is there a book or a video or an athlete or a coach to follow that you would recommend to the young riders who may want some advice on, tackling techie stuff?
I looked at two videos that actually they're not very old at all, and I like both of them because it's kind of like the full picture. I mean, I believe it's not just important to be able to go downhill. One needs to be able to go uphill and have uphill fitness as well, and vice versa. And the two videos that I watched recently that were inspiring is 8,600 feet, riding up the whole enchilada. Did you get to see that one?
I did not yet, but I've got it on my list of things to do.
It's really neat. It's very inspiring, because everyone thinks about riding down the whole enchilada, and that's fun, no question. It's awesome, but yeah, it's amazing the dedication this guy had to riding up it, how much it cost him to do it. And then, of course, the other one is Hannah Otto. She's got the fastest recorded whole enchilada loop. So she rode from town all the way up, the pass, and then down the whole enchilada, and right now it's got the record on that. I thought that was pretty cool because, incorporating the road climb and everything in it, and it just is a documentary that she and her husband did, and that was both of those were really inspiring to me. I'm sure there are many more, but those are the two that I thought of recently that are worth the watch for sure.
You can look those up on YouTube or just on the internet, you think?
I think I found them both on YouTube. They're readily available. Like, I think Pink Bike had both of them posted. So okay. Yeah, those are pretty neat. They're pretty fun to watch.
So search both of those up. I know I'm going to watch both of those. They are on my to-do list. I just didn't have the time this weekend or last week, so I'll get to it this week, and I'm going to check those out. Lon, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we sign off?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I have a ton of respect for you and what you do, like doing the Iceman Cometh and all of those long races and cold races. And, yeah, man, that's kind of like you were saying, respecting what those pro downhillers are doing. Same for me and what you're doing. I was actually able to benefit from a fitness coach for a whole year. And boy, it changed my riding a lot. Like, I was amazed at how building a fitness base with somebody who knows how to build one really makes the bike skills way better. So I really love that. Love what you're doing with the podcast, and been watching your videos ever since back whenever you build out your van. So yeah, keep it up, man. Doing good stuff.
I appreciate all that, and I also look up to you with your riding skills. I still visualize what I saw you climbing up techy hills and going down steep slabs when we were at Oak Mountain. It was really inspiring, and that led me to tackling some more things that I wouldn't have done, when we go to Colorado and sessioning things to get better at technical stuff. So, yeah, it goes both ways there.
Oh, thank you, brother. And hopefully one day I can come up and ride with you on your trails in Michigan.
Yeah. Hey, if you're ever up here, you got to let me know.
Heck yeah, man.
Where can people find you on the web if they want to connect with you? Maybe on social media and if you have a website.
Both Instagram and my website are singletrackskills.bike.
And you said singletrackskills.bike, correct?
That's it.
Find him there. That's his social media tag, and that's his website. So check him out. Lon, I've had a great time with you on the podcast today. Thanks again for saving me on the trail a few years back when I didn't have anything to fix my tire. Here in Michigan, like I said before, it's rare to have a flat compared to the chunk of Oak Mountain State Park. I look forward to watching more of your tips and content on social media, and I appreciate you taking the time today to have this discussion.
Hey, Rob, thanks a lot, my brother.
This was a lot of fun, and to all the listeners, gratitude. You have just listened to Unpacking the Athlete.